Michael Møller, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you for having me.
So we want to talk a little bit about Sustainable Development Goals, SDGs. Can you tell me a little bit more about them and maybe one that really stands out to you?
Well, first of all, these were goals that were agreed to by the world 2 years ago, 2015, in a rather extraordinary process, very different from past agreements, world agreements, because it involved not just governments and government officials, it involved people from all over the globe. We spoke to about 10 million people online in the lead up to it. But the real important part of it is, I would highlight three things. First of all, it's universal. The goals are universal. There's poverty everywhere on this planet. They are just as relevant for Switzerland as for Swaziland. The second one is the principle of leaving no one behind. Very fundamental principle. That means that everybody who is at the very bottom of the ladder needs to be brought along into prosperity and into health and into well-being. And the third one is where the responsibility for their implementation lies. This is not something like we did in the past that we're leaving to governments and then we'll call them once a year to see how they're doing. This is every single person's responsibility. All of us have to be part of the implementation of these goals. And only if we do so are we going to manage to do it. We can. We have the experience, we have the expertise, we have the resources. We lack sometimes the political will, but that's where the issue of everybody pitching in and the pressure of civil society and of business and of parts of society that normally don't get involved with these kinds of things is hugely important.
So that really leads to my second question. Number 13 on the list is climate.
Yes.
And Salesforce recently joined a number of other companies like Apple, Facebook, in supporting the Paris Agreement.
Yes.
Why is it so important for private companies to take action, to make a difference, to show their voice in different sustainable goals?
Well, it's come back to what I said before, and this is particularly true for climate change. Look, if we don't address the effects of climate change and we don't reverse the serious mismanagement that we have subjected our planet to over many decades, all the other stuff is immaterial because we won't be able to breathe and we won't have water to drink and we won't be here, basically. Right. It sounds a little dramatic, but that's the fact. So if there's any of the goals that really requires everybody to put their energy and their focus in being part of sort of an international solidarity movement to get it fixed, it's that one. And business has, to a much larger extent than many other members of society, both the wherewithal, the resources, the people, but also the personal interest. I mean, it's in their interest. It's in every business interest to make sure that this is solved. Otherwise, there will be no business.
Right.
So it's a shared responsibility, and business has a big role to play in that.
We are always so proud when Benioff uses the term, Mark Benioff, our founder at Salesforce, the business of doing business is to make the world a better place.
That's exactly right.
How do we get more people, more companies, more leaders to jump on board that and recognize that it is everyone's responsibility to work towards these sustainable goals?
Well, first of all, by doing what Salesforce is doing is one thing, like this conference where we talk about it and you lead by example. But in today's world, it's also actually to make sure that the facts speak for themselves, and the facts are very clear. It's good business to be a good social citizen, a corporate social responsibility. It's good business to make sure that in the areas in which you work as a business, that you provide the best possible environment for what are going to be your potential clients, potential employees, potential investors. So it's not rocket science. It's simply pretty clear, so we have to talk a bit about. We have to ramp up a little bit and improve our narrative to make sure that people understand, and we have to do a little bit better at passing on the very dry and statistics that show that what I'm saying is actually facts.
So speaking of facts really speaking for themselves, we have an issue with fake news.
Yes.
And that leads into what is responsible technology. In a lot of ways, technology is feeding into fake news, and then we're working to have it not. What does it mean to have responsible technology and move technology forward and the world forward with technology without falling into those traps of fake news and other downfalls of technology?
Well, it's part of a greater ecosystem, if you want. I mean, we have to step back a little bit and talk about what are we going to do to change the way we educate our kids and for the way that the world is going to be in the future. We have to talk about what we do to change the way that media of whatever kind, both new and old, take their responsibility in terms of not just presenting news, but also being a part of the educational system. We have over 7 billion phones on the planet today. Many of them are smartphones, and about 2 billion of them, and in a few years, 3 or 4 or 5 billion people will have smartphones. It means that everybody has access to information instantaneously. It also means that everybody has a way of expressing their voice and their opinion and their needs. If we don't make sure that all of these billions of people know what they're talking about and are educated and are shown what the options are and give them the tools to look beyond just the very narrow agendas that they live in, which is a normal human reaction, we are going to have a pretty heavy cacophony and chaos. We need to use technology to educate, and we need to use technology to make sure that everybody understands what the choices are at whatever level of society we're talking about. So it's clear that technology is going to change, is changing our lives, is changing the way we live, the way we work. It's also clear that here we have to be much better at living up to the responsibility of making sure that we use the technology in an ethical way, and that we, in many ways, take charge of our future rather than letting the future take charge of us. And that is only done if we are smart about how we go about it, and if we include many more of our partners in society, whether they're in civil society, whether they're in the academic world, whether they are in the business world. It's about rethinking and rekindling and international solidarity in a way that is really impactful and makes sense. Not just talk, but we really have to walk the talk.
Yeah, walking the talk is, very important, again, across all of the different sectors that you're speaking of. And one thing that we really want to get across, and I have said this already, but business leaders have the ability to really affect change.
Of course.
What are the key qualities that you see of successful leaders, maybe both in business and any other sector, that people really follow and are willing and excited to learn from?
Well, there's quite a few qualities. But I think that in today's world, in this very interconnected world in which we have to rethink completely the way we work and be aware of the impact of our actions, not just in terms of our own little world and whatever business we're in, means that leaders have to have that understanding of a broader understanding of the world they operate in, and a broader understanding of the impact of what they do and what others do on what their business is. It means a high degree of empathy. It means a high degree of and the ability to communicate a clear understanding of what the role of that particular business is in making the world a better place, both writ large, but also in the communities in which they operate. It's really about making sure that the communities and the markets in which they operate, that there is a much greater synergy between the clients, between the people working for them, and the view and the sort of the DNA of the company itself. So leadership is about being able to think outside the box. In many cases, it's about being able to throw the box away altogether and move forward, take risks, be ready to fail every now and then, which is obviously one aspect of leadership. It's one aspect of the way that all of us should be working. But for me, it really is a very clear understanding of the responsibility that each of us has, particularly those of us who are lucky enough to have been given the wherewithal to become leaders, vis-a-vis society as a whole, and certainly the societies in which we operate much closely.
Well, thank you so much for being a trailblazer.
My pleasure.